Last week, Doug Skinner, our senior minister, wrote a blog. He titled it, "No Sermon Can Say All That Can Be Said." Great blog. And he described in it the problem that we preachers face. We finish preaching, we leave the church, get in our cars, and we begin to digest what we just preached and have the question, did I say what I should have said? Sometimes we get in the car and we say, on the other hand, the Bible said this. There's so much that could be said on a topic, and that really is the struggle of biblical preaching, because the Bible has lots of things to say, and sometimes they are different things. Doug noted it was particularly true of this topic we're wrestling with right now, the idea of prayer, and I agree. And that's true this week, here in the 5th week of Lent, as we begin to examine the question, how long should I keep praying for the same thing? I think that question, how long, really has two parts. One, how long should my prayer be? And two, how many times should I keep praying for the same thing? It's a question of duration and repetition. The Bible gives us some thoughts on this. On the one hand, Paul says, pray without ceasing. On the other hand, Psalm 55 talks about praying evening and morning and noon. Then there's Jesus, the foremost authority on praying, who, when the disciples asked him how we should pray, said, here's the Lord's Prayer. It's relatively short, but on the other hand, Jesus is noted in the Gospels as praying all night long at times. The same is true for how many times we should pray. I talked a couple weeks ago about the story of Daniel in chapter 9, how his prayer was answered before he had even finished praying. And yet then we say on the other times, people like Paul who prayed on 3 occasions for something to be removed and didn't get the answer he was looking for. And then across the scope of the biblical history, we find Bible characters praying over and over for the same things and not feeling like they've received an answer. The Bible may not say only one thing, but it does give us an analogy that's helpful as we think about the idea of prayer. And that analogy is wrestling. Now, when you think of wrestling, you may think WWF, or you might think of sweaty high school guys in a small high school gym, or you might even think about 2 sumo wrestlers. Prayer is sometimes described as wrestling with God. Genesis 32 tells us the story of Jacob wrestling with a man all night, literally wrestling with a guy who turns out to be God, asking for a blessing. In Romans, Paul describes his prayer as wrestling with God. And you can probably think of a time where you have wrestled with God over a particular issue, where you've struggled with God for a blessing. And the question is always, whose will is going to win out? Whose will be done? So I invite you this week to think about some times where you have in the past wrestled with God. How did it work out? Did the match go the way you expected it would? And then think about something that you're currently wrestling with God about. What does that match look like? Are you sweaty and on your back, pinned down? Or do you feel like you've gained an advantage? Or has it been flipping back and forth? That's the struggle of prayer. And that's a topic we're going to wrestle some more with this Sunday.